Dear LLSP alumni and alumni, Assalamu alaikum and welcome to today's Lunch and Learn interview. Our guest today is Ms. Hurunnessa Fariad. As it happens, we have a lot in common. She and I are both alumna of KARAMAH's first virtual LLP, the 2020 cohort, and we are both content creators as hosts of this video series and a podcast series, respectively. I've asked Ms. Fariad to be my guest today to discuss a matter of urgent concern to the American Muslim community, namely the resettlement of nearly 100,000 Afghans airlifted out of Afghanistan in the final weeks of the US military presence in that country, and what we can do to facilitate that process. But before we dive into that topic, I'd like to tell you a bit more about Ms. Fariad. Ms. Fariad is the Director of Outreach for Multi-Faith Neighbors Network. She's also Head of Outreach at the All Dulles Area Muslim Society, the Adams Center. Ms. Fariad is the Secretary of the Board of Directors at Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy, Leadership Circle for One America Movement, member of the Fairfax County Faith and Equity Committee, board member at Lutheran Social Services National Capital Area, board member at American Muslim Institution, and involved with many other faith-based organizations. She is the founder and music director of America's first mosque youth choir, the Adams Beat Choir. She's also the founder and co-host of the Sister Act podcast, along with co-hosts Dr. Sabrina Dent and Rabbi Susan Shankman. Conversations center around shame, stigma, women's rights, social justice issues, and how our faiths address these topics. Dear Hurunnessa, so happy to have you here today, even though I know you've got the sniffles, so don't worry if you have to stop to sneeze. Could you please start by telling us how and why you ended up as a board member of Lutheran Family Services of the National Capital Area?
Thank you so much, Sarah, for having me on. It's really a pleasure to be here with you and have this very important conversation about what's actually going on with the Afghan evacuees here in the United States. So I had worked with Lutheran Social Services before with my work at the Adams Center, and I knew the CEO, Kristen Peck. And when this whole influx of Afghans started coming in, Lutheran is the biggest resettlement agency here in the DMV area. So she reached out to me and said, hey, we have a couple of seats that need to be filled on the board, and we would love for you to come on because you are Afghan. You know the culture, you know the language, you know what is needed, you can relate on so many different levels, but at the same time, you're Muslim and you're in the community, you're part of a mosque, and the outreach and interfaith work that you do is so needed in the workspace that they were in at that moment. So I thought about it because I was already on the board of a few organizations and I didn't want to stretch myself too thin or take something on that I wouldn't be able to give 100%. And so I decided that, yes, it is important to have an Afghan on the board, especially being the first Afghan on their board ever and the first Muslim female on their board. The fact that they would think of it and see it as something that is necessary and important really resonated with me very much so. And I thought that that was a good move on their part to know that what the community wanted and needed is being implemented in their system. And that also relates back to my own history as a child refugee coming to the United States when I was 5 years old. I was the first wave of Afghans here after the Soviets invaded Afghanistan back in the late 70s. I was a child. And we left Afghanistan when I was 2. We lived in Pakistan for about 3 years as refugees. And then we came here to the United States. I was 5. We landed at JFK Airport, and I grew up in Queens, New York City. That's where I actually consider home because all of my childhood memories are of Queens. And so it was only proper for everything that's going on right now to resonate with me and my history as an immigrant child coming to this country, not speaking the language, and English being forced down my throat as my third language, and I was only 5 years old. So I can relate in a lot of different ways with the families that are coming in, and I tell them that everything's going to be okay. You just have to give things time because it is definitely a different type of experience for the U.S. government and all the agencies that are working to get them settled here.
So I'm curious, the airlifting began in what, end of July, beginning of August, but by the end of August was in full swing. Is that right? So when did you come on the board of Lutheran Social Services?
I think I was brought in the beginning of September, so
Oh.
it was pretty early on.
Mm-hmm. But I think by then they were already getting lists of approximately how many people were going to be arriving. And is the rest of your family still in Queens?
Yeah, so all of my siblings are in Queens except myself. I'm here in Northern Virginia, and my eldest sister she lives in Turkey. So we're the two, and everybody in the middle are still in Queens.
Okay, it sounds like you guys really had settled down in Queens. That's it for now.
I won't leave. My siblings will not leave. I didn't think I was ever going to leave, but life and circumstances change, right? So you gotta go with the flow.
That's right. Well, I'm sure we're very glad to have you here in Northern Virginia. So, Hurunnessa, could you give our viewers an overview of the process of resettling refugees and tell us what makes the resettlement of the current wave of Afghans more challenging than normal?
Yes, I'm going to start with what like a normal resettlement would look like, just a brief high-level overview. It takes months. The resettlement agencies get notice months in advance about who's coming, how many people, where they're going to be settled, and if it's within their city, they get obviously the case themselves. And so they have time to find housing, find organizations who are going to set up the apartment. All the things that they need will already be done before they come here. So it's pre-planned. Now, normally Lutheran Social Services last year, on an average, resettles about 500 people in a year. But this year, between July and last month only, they've resettled 2,000 people.
Oh my God.
In a 4 or 5 month time frame.
Mm-hmm.
They resettled 4 years worth of people. And so you can imagine the pressure, the numbers that are coming in is really taking a toll on the staff. So Lutheran went from having 50 staff members to 65 to 100, and now they're going to go to 150. So they are trying to keep up with everything that's going on in terms of them being able to have staff ready for the evacuees coming in, so that they have the caseworker ready and that they're able to give them the needs that they have, so their needs are being met by the caseworker. But it's not that easy, because you can see that there's so many people at the office. If you were to go there, the waiting room is packed. There's always walk-ins coming in, people left the bases early without their paperwork going through. That's a big mistake, because if your paperwork's not ready, the resettlement agency really can't push a lot of your stuff forward, because you need your work authorization documents, your social security card, and all that stuff. So it's been a challenge with a lot of people leaving the bases early, and that takes another toll on the resettlement agency, because they have to file extra paperwork for them as well.
So that slows everything down. Now, you said bases. Just to clarify, the initial arrival point because they were essentially militarily lifted out, they come in first to US air bases, and then from there, they're distributed to other places. Is that more or less how the system works? And how is it that certain areas are preferential arrival points for? We were told in Philadelphia that because we had a fairly large settled Afghan community there, we would be receiving 500 or more families to the Philadelphia area. Is it the same for Northern Virginia?
So I'm not sure what the requirements were that when they chose Virginia as the first transit point, because they came through Northern Virginia through Dulles Airport, which is literally 10 minutes from my house. And they were going through the Expo Center as another transit point, and then they would go out to the military bases, only because there was no other place to house them.
Wow.
So they were going to the military bases as a place to stay, so that they could fix their paperwork and get all these things done. Now, you have to understand, these are the people who made it to the US. There are a lot of people who are still in lily pads across the world, which are other countries and other military bases that are hosting the Afghan evacuees there until they either come here or they get settled in a third country. So there's still more people out there that haven't even arrived here yet. So it's a big task that's been taken on. It's not that simple. So once they come through and they get assigned a military base, some are in San Antonio. I think there's, if I'm not mistaken, 6 or 8 military bases that the Afghan evacuees have been spread out to in the United States. 3 of them are here in Virginia. And so slowly, a lot of them are being closed just because they want to make sure that they're not putting too much pressure on any one base. Just like Virginia was the initial transit point for them, then it went to Philadelphia because they didn't want to tax each state too much. So they're trying to spread it out. Now, amongst Afghans, the 3 biggest cities are Virginia, states are Virginia, California, and Texas. So Pennsylvania is not one of the preferences for Afghans at all. They want to go where their friends are or their families are, or where there's a huge Afghan population. And these 3 areas are the highest right now. And Virginia is on top. So a lot of people are waiting at the military bases to have a resettlement agency in Virginia to take their case on, rather than go to, let's say, another state, Michigan, or any other state that has housing, that has availability. They don't want to go there because for them, there's no Afghans, there's no Muslim community. They don't want to go somewhere that they can't have familiar people around them, which in the long run, I can understand. But at the same time, it's definitely important for them to know that it's only 3 months for them to go get their benefits, get settled. And then if they want to move, they can move. But for those first 3 months, it's important for them to go where they have access. And the $1,225 that they get from the resettlement agency goes much further in a state where the living expenses are much cheaper than Northern Virginia, because
oh my goodness, yes,
doesn't do anything here. And so a lot of these things they don't know, and explaining it to them is definitely a crucial part. And I know Hada Sanin, who is the senior advisor for DHS, he's Afghan also, he's one of my relatives. He's doing a great job in making sure that people are getting the information, but also incentivizing the evacuees to go to different states as well, so that they can get out of the military bases and start their process of paperwork earlier.
So you mentioned benefits. Can we maybe take a step back and tell our viewers a little bit about essentially the 3 categories that Afghans arriving here are generally in one of 3 categories, basically. There are the SIV people who have completed applications, approvals, SIVs in process, and then the humanitarian parolees. And what does that mean for them in terms of what kinds of benefits they can access?
So before October 1st, it was a little bit different. SIVs, which are the special immigrant visas, are mostly awarded to people who worked with the US military in Afghanistan and who applied to come to the United States. And if they had their SIVs already, they would come in, and once they got here, they've already been approved, they're basic green card holders, and they would get all the benefits through the resettlement agencies. And I pretty much same thing with the SIVs who are in process, but I'm not really sure how their process was working, because again, everything was on the fly. So if their SIV application was on a fly, they were still trying to figure out whether to give them the SIV status or
deny it.
Right. So I think there are a lot of people who either got one or the other, and not everyone got the same. And then the humanitarian parolees are people who had no affiliation with the US government, just fleeing for the safety of their lives and their families, and who were able to just get on the plane. Just a regular person, who lived in Kabul or in another city, who decided that, hey, I don't feel safe here, I want to get out. And so they boarded the plane. And before October 1st, the benefits that the SIVs would get would be Medicaid, food stamp, a lot of the social services that are given to them. The humanitarian parolees did not qualify for that. And that was a huge issue. So Congress moved really fast, and they passed a law which now would give the same benefits to the humanitarian parolees. So they were able to apply for Medicaid and food stamp and monetary help as well, so that they can live and feed themselves, because everything is backed up. So trying to get the resettlement agencies to get their paperwork processed, to give them their benefits, is has become very long and arduous. Obviously so, because they're so pressured and they have so many clients coming in. They're working as fast as they can. They're under a lot of pressure, but they're doing the best that they can. So I'm glad that at least Congress passed this law so that that made it a lot easier for the Afghans to get the benefits that they need.
Alhamdulillah. I mean, to me, one of the issues, of course, is if you came in as a humanitarian parolee, presumably you have the right to make your case for asylum, and eventually you'll get an adjudication of it one way or another. But, and I realize this is a longer term issue and we're focused right now on immediate needs, but since I practiced immigration law for a long time, one of my concerns is, what do you do with the people whose claim of asylum is at some point 2 or 3 years from now denied? At that point, what have we created for ourselves? Another DACA issue. But I suppose that's really a topic for another day.
I think that's going to be a huge issue, because a lot of these people probably will not qualify for asylum once they apply for it, because they have 2 years. Their humanitarian parolee status is for 2 years, and within that time frame, they have to apply for asylum. But there is an act called the Afghan Adjustment Act, which I did talk to Senator Kane's office about, and we're trying to come up with a way to promote it. Basically, the Afghan evacuees could apply for a green card. And I think that would make it so much easier for them to skip this whole asylum process, because they're not going to get approved if they go that way.
Very few of them, I think. Yep.
Exactly. A majority of them will probably have to go back. And then if they go back, they definitely will be targeted. So
yeah, well, they can't go back. So they end up in this horrible limbo of not having no rights, no benefits, and no pathway towards status. And at the same time, not really being able to go anywhere else. So
yeah, and some of them might choose to go back if that was the case, because at least back home for them, it might be something that they would consider. I don't know. So I think this act would make things a little, not a little bit easier, but it would make it a lot better for
easier.
them. So
I see.
the green card would definitely make things so much easier for them and their families. And so that's something that I'm pushing with Senator Kane's office right now.
So this is clearly an evolving situation. If I understand you correctly, Hurunnessa, the most urgent need right now is what exactly? What at this point in the incoming flood, what are the 1 or 2 or 3 most urgent needs for Afghans that you're working with through the Lutheran Social Services?
So I think there's 2 things that go hand in hand. One is housing, and then the other is employment. So one of the issues with housing is the fact that people cannot get housing because landlords are not okay with renting out their spaces to people who don't have a credit history or credit report, and can't do a background check on them per se, because they really don't have anything to look up.
History.
So for the landlord, it's a big risk. So we're trying to figure out ways where we could work with the landlords and make things easier for them to understand that, this is definitely something you're taking on. But on the other hand, if the person applying has a job, which is the other issue, then they would feel a lot more secure that, okay, at least this person is working, let's rent it out to them because I'm doing something out of the goodness of my heart and taking this on. Even though financially for some of them, that might not be the best route to take, but we're trying to incentivize it for them as much as we can. I know the resettlement agencies are also giving their clients letters of support that they are clients of, let's say, Lutheran Social Services, and they're getting this much funding and we could pay the rent for this long. And so there are those things happening as well. But when they have a job, it just makes it so much easier for the landlord to say, okay, that's fine. If they don't have a credit history, I can give them this apartment or this townhouse based on the fact that they have a job. So if they have a job, it'll be easier for them to make their living and then also get a place to live.
Hence the change in October, making it possible for people to get employment authorization really, really is a big step forward. And to anybody watching this, if you're in a position to offer a job, do offer it to one of these people. They are awfully hardworking. They need the job. You know, if they have their employment cards, give an Afghan refugee a job. It would be a good thing you're doing.
Lutheran Social Services had a job fair. I think it was like last month, and it was great. They had like over 40 companies come, and over 100 Afghan evacuees come, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but there were a lot of Afghans who came to apply for jobs, from food services to IT jobs to cars, you name it. There were all sorts of employment opportunities there available for them. So it was a great way for them to network and find someone to hire them. So the people at the base actually did apply for the employment authorization card, which they were doing once they got on the base. That was even before October 1st. So these people who came as a humanitarian parolees are, even before October 1st, were able to apply for EADs, because there's a family that I'm working with, the aunt and nephew did get their work authorization documents. And so they have that, and they had applied for that through the bases way before October 1st. It's just the benefits of Medicaid, food stamp, and the SNAP or TANF. I don't know what it's actually it's called in terms of the benefit itself, but it's all of these extra stuff that they would need in order to feed their families and take care of them financially, because without money, you really can't do anything. You can't buy food, you can't get a house, you can't get a roof over your head, you can't get clothes. So all of these things are something that really need to be honed in. And if we're bringing them in, we have to make adjustments, right? So it would be a waste of time and energy, I would think, if we did all of this and spent so many resources and then at the end said, sorry, you cannot apply for green card or status here. Figure it out yourself. What's going to happen? Like, I'm trying to figure, you're gonna have so many homeless people on the streets, not like we don't already have enough.
Already have a lot. Yeah,
which we're not taking care of. Now you're gonna have more on top of that. So I think it would be a wise choice for the US to look at things from this route.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and in this case, even for people who are dubious about making big changes to US immigration law, they could at least look at this particular situation and craft some specific sets of regulations that would fit the needs. But well, inshallah khair.
Right? It's such a unique case that you really can't use what you've already had here, because it's definitely not going to work. So what can we do to ameliorate the situation so that you have people living here with documentation and at the same time their needs are being met, but also making sure that they're being held accountable for being citizens of this country or living here. Of course.
Well, Hurunnessa, I know you've been involved in preparing for the arrival of Afghan families since back in August. Could you share some stories about this work that you've done?
Okay, so there's so many stories. I didn't
By
really
now. Two of your favorites.
Two of my favorites. Okay, so two of my favorites is one, a family that I was given by Sully Police Department in Fairfax County. Two sisters who are DV victims, Afghan. One just recently arrived. One came almost 2 years ago. She was 8 months pregnant. The aunt and the brother were at a base in New Mexico. So we took them in, been helping them out, trying to get them their benefits. I was actually in the hospital room with the sister who was having the baby. That was such an experience for me. I never, ever in my wildest dream ever thought I was going to be in the delivery room with anyone. I'm not.
New career. Oh no, midwifery is not an option.
I will tell you, when I was 16, I actually wanted to be a pediatrician, and I worked at a hospital as a volunteer, and I kept fainting. And so I realized that no, it's just not going to work for me. And so I got a little dizzy, I have to say, when they were putting the epidural in her back, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm not feeling all that great.
Deep breaths.
But watching that baby come to life, and then they were like, oh, do you want to cut the umbilical cord? And I'm like, me? What? They're like, yeah, you. I was like, oh wow. And then she's like, yeah, it's a little chewy. Like, they made it seem like such a normal thing, but for me it was just like, wow, I was part of this process. And that baby girl is like so dear to my heart, because I feel like I've been with this her through this journey of coming into this world and feeling really hard, and in terms of the hardship that I've realized that the mother's going through. She's only 20,
Ah.
and being a DV victim in a country, she doesn't know the language, doesn't know anything. And they're always telling me how grateful they are that God brought me into their life, because for them, it's like, they're like, no one would do what you do for us. And, I take them food shopping. I'm not saying this because I'm doing anything great, but these are the kinds of things people need. Like, I take them food shopping. I've been able to secure money for at least 1 year of their rent for the next year, so that they could get back on their feet. They could go to school, they could learn English, save up some money, and so they don't have to scramble about paying their rent. And in the process, an organization came up to me and said, tell us their story. And I did. And they said, you know what, we have shelters for DV victims, and it's a brand new apartment, 3-bedroom, 2-bath. They could stay in there for years, no rent.
MashaAllah.
Like, wow, like God really takes care of people. And I think their story resonates with me so much more because, I came from an abusive relationship myself. My marriage, it wasn't physical, but it was definitely something that was very difficult for me to go through. And I never want to see another woman have to go through that. And if I could help someone get through that myself, then why not? I think God always gives us opportunities to do good for people. And it's up to us to take that on or say, like, no, I don't have time for them. So they're like other family that doesn't live with me, but that I take care of and help out when I can. So yeah, we take little baby to the doctor's office and get her vaccines and all that. It's really cute. The other story is just my multi-faith interfaith work that I do with a lot of different churches and synagogues, and people of other faith groups really came into fruition on the relationship that we had. But I really got to see how these relationships manifested themselves into the churches and synagogues helping out, where I decided to do a coat drive for Lutheran Social Services at the end of September, because I knew obviously winter was coming and this was going to be a need. But you can't start doing a coat drive in November or December because it's already so
too late.
So we started it, and I went to my friend, he's Afghan as well. He owns an auto body shop here in Sterling, and I asked him because he had space, and he said, I have space, so why don't you come and use the space to store whatever you need until I get the office rented. I said, okay, sounds good. And so we did this coat drive for 4 days in October. We collected over 2,000 coats for men, women, and children. And 99.9% of those coats came from churches in Maryland. The Episcopal churches that have their network are so amazing. I've never seen a faith-based group work so well in knit and organized as them. They just kept coming and coming, and they kept saying, we're from Maryland, we're from Maryland. There was a few from DC as well. But I was just amazed at how people can come together with this notion that we serve humanity and that we have to love one another. And it doesn't matter what faith you practice or how you view God, but the fact that I'm a human being, you're a human being, and I do want to help you. And I think that's what's been sustaining so much what's been going on, is this idea of loving one another and then practicing our faiths through that, right? Because all of our faiths talk about helping the needy and helping those who are the stranger and helping those who are in need of help. So I'm so grateful for all of these organizations coming in and collecting the 2,000 coats. So we store them at the auto body shop, and then Lutheran came twice to pick up the coats and do their coat distribution for the Afghan evacuees at their site. And it just worked out so well. We've collected so many other things, countless other places, other mosques in the area, like the Imam Ali Center in Springfield is doing an amazing job. They literally closed down their basement for donation drop-offs. I mean, it's a huge space. When I went, I almost gasped because it was just full of stuff. And they're doing such an amazing job in making sure that anybody who needs anything, whether it's through the resettlement agency or at the bases, their needs are being met with the things that they have over there. And we had collected stuff at Sterling as well. And one day we took a truck. I drove a 26-foot truck I'm 5'1". Okay. So
So you had to take a ladder to get up into the
a
cab.
little had to hoist myself up on the seat. And we went from
And tie blocks on your feet so you could reach the pedal. Yes.
well, the good thing was the seat was adjustable, so I wasn't able to reach the pedal, but drove it for 35 minutes each way, going and coming back. And I stopped at a gas station, and all the men were looking at me like, "Oh, you're so tiny." And they're actually like, we were quite, marveled at how you drove that truck and changed lanes properly. I said, "That's right.
Efficiently and correctly without killing anybody.
Like, don't underestimate women." And then for them to see my scarf was even more surprising for them, because unfortunately we're seen and deemed as oppressed and can't really do anything and uneducated. So it was a good thing to kind of change that viewpoint for a little bit. But yeah, those are stories that will always be ingrained in the memories that I have about this project.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you're going to have the opportunity for a lot more interesting things. I should probably interview you in a few months and ask you about more of your interesting experiences. And I really have to say, I don't know how you find the emotional strength and resilience to deal with this situation. So all I can say is, may Allah give you strength. Personally, I feel like weeping. In closing, is there anything else you'd like to share with our viewers? And in particular, if they want to get involved, what should they do? If you like, you can share the slide that we have. It will tell people where to go and what, you can tell them what to do, and the slide will tell them where to go.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm going to share the slide right now. And this is the social service organization I was telling you about, Lutheran Social Services National Area Capital Area. That's their website. They have a slew of things you can do just from your home, whether you want to donate financially or you want to sponsor a family, you can do that as well. And a lot of different things that you can get in touch with. If you're in the DMV area and you want to work for Lutheran Social Services, they're hiring. So I always point that out to people, to please go and seek a job with them and help as much as you can, because they do need help. And so they're willing to hire people because they're getting the funding from the government as well. And then we also have one from the Philly area as well. So, you can definitely go to the Philly area's services. Highest is there, in the National Identity Service Center website is there as well. You can definitely tap into that as well. But if you're in a different city, there are other resettlement agencies all across the US. Just look for resettlement agencies. Google it in your city and you will find it really quickly, and you can contact them and see what kind of help they need and services that they provide that you can tap into as well. I think one of the main things to focus on is that America is built on immigration, right? We've all come here
from somewhere,
from overseas. And so that's the beauty of this country in terms of when we look at the history of it. Of course, the natives are indigenous are a different story. But overall, I think that we just need to keep an open mind and open heart and realize that our humanity is so much greater than any other kind of demeaning or negative things we might have or perceptions we might have of other people, and that we have to let that come out and let that really resonate in your community, whether you want to help set up an apartment, whether you want to help with ESL classes, whether you want to help them fill out forms for school, whatever it is you can do, reach out to the resettlement agencies. They have a lot of volunteer opportunities as well. Use your time to make life a little bit better for someone else, and you will sleep so much better at night knowing that you are helping another family in need. And I think that's the best feeling you will ever have, and you really can't get that from anything else.
I think you're absolutely right. And Hurunnessa, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. This is something that I'm passionately, in favor of, is helping these people that we've brought in, here now on the verge of winter and all the hardships that they're going to be facing. So thank you for all the work you're doing and for sharing this information with our viewers. Inshallah, in future, you and I can do another interview to discuss Muslim women as content creators. I've been listening to your podcast. There are a couple of others of our sister LLSP alumna who are busy doing videos and podcasts, and we should get together sometime and cross-promote each other's work, inshallah.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to that. Thank you so much, Sada, for having me. This was a great, great conversation.
It certainly